the great worry that we have in the digital age is that we've already given so much of it up, both to private agencies and to public ones.
One way in which you'll give up personal information is obviously by clicking on one thing or another that reveals the sorts of things you're interested in. But how would they get from that to actually figuring out, for instance, who you are? Well, it's well known in the privacy world that things like your birth date, your gender, and your postal code or zip code will allow people to figure out who you actually are, what your true name is. Now, how might a website get that information from you? Well, let's say you want to sign up for a horoscope. Then you're going to give them your birth date and probably tell them whether or not you're a man or a woman. Then maybe you want to find out what your local weather is. Probably the easiest way to do that is to put in your postal code or zip code. And bingo, they've got 3 pieces of information that are going to make it really easy for them to figure out exactly who you are.
Every single time we go online, every time we look at a website, every time we send an email message, every time we make a phone call with our mobile telephones, we're exposing ourselves, we're stripping ourselves naked to the view of anybody who is interested to find out what we're doing. We know already that private agencies are keen to look at the pattern of use of the internet that we indulge in so that they can target advertising at us. And governments in the Western world, indeed in the world at large, are anxious to keep a record of who people are talking to, what kind of information they're finding out, so that they can detect patterns of, that suggest crime or terrorism in the offing. And in all these ways, therefore, we expose ourselves to view through the use of these devices.
Generation has a sense that information wants to be free and information about themselves wants to be free. And in a way, there's a kind of self-surveillance that I think that young people don't think about in political terms. But it is a political issue. People put their lives on the screen. They put really intimate details of their lives out there, and with very little thought that there might be people using that information in ways that are not benign. I did an interview with a 16-year-old that is precious to me because he talked about how he knows that people, can read his email. He knows that people somehow he senses that his texts are being saved in some server in the sky. But he, when he wants to have a private conversation, he goes to payphones, and he feels that payphones are the only safe place for him to talk. I mean, you have this sense of even young people looking for the interstices of the system to find a little privacy. I don't think this is good.
There's a massive generational difference in how people see the web, and that's one of the things that I find most interesting and exciting, not only just between classic generational breakdowns, but much more split and atomized fragments of early 20s to late 20s to mid 20s. It's more about kind of the stage of life you're at as well, I think, and where you are in the education cycle. If I look now at how 8, 9, 10-year-olds use the web, it's completely different to how somebody aged 18 would use it, completely different how I would use it again. And I think that one of the issues around the privacy questions that are now being raised are, have we taught children how to be safe online enough? And are we, aware enough, if we've come at this later with technology, of all the different ways that information is used? So there's definitely a piece of education that needs to underpin all of the developments that are happening in technology.
Say that because I've heard a theory that, that people won't trust people in the future. Say they run for political office if they don't have that exposure, if they haven't thrown themselves all up online, because they won't have that track record. People will say, well, why not? What were you trying to hide? And do you think that is an aspect of naivety? Do you think I'm naive because I'm part of this culture, that I think, well, our concepts have shifted so much?
The concepts are shifting, but we always have to take into account privilege. Who has privilege in the system and who doesn't? Right? I have the great privilege to be able to say, this is who I am, you will deal with me like it or not. But I'm in a very particular position, professionally, socially, etc. There are a lot of people for whom that's not true. And the classic example that everybody can reach out to, can make sense of, is the teacher. Right? The teacher we think of as a perfectly reasonable character in our lives, but the teacher is supposed to have a big boundary between what they do in the classroom and what they do elsewhere, right? And for example, sex is not supposed to enter the classroom, and yet teachers have a right to have a sex life. They're old enough to be allowed to drink and it not be an issue. And so what happens when their students get to see access of their personal lives in another context? How is that used to shift the power roles in the classroom? And for many teachers, it's a point of deep struggle and frustration, right? What does it mean to be on an online dating site and your students track down your profile that was never meant for them, where no name was ever explained, but it was meant to try to live a life outside of the classroom? And what happens when it gets interpreted by those teenagers' parents of like, what are you doing? Why do my kids have to see you dating? And that becomes a really interesting boundary problem.
We should be very worried, I think, about the amount of data concerning ourselves, including very personal, private, intimate data about ourselves, which is now out there in the public domain, both in private and in public hands. We should be worried about it for a large number of reasons, but one central reason is that this information is stored digitally in one or another location out there in a way that we may not have access to ourselves. And it's very, very easily manipulated. It's very easily changed by somebody who is either lazy, incompetent, or malevolent in some way. It's very easy for that information to be shared and for patterns of information to seem to appear to certain agencies that could put one under suspicion even if one weren't a suspicious individual. In other words, the prospect for misinformation, for corruption of our personal information, and for mistakes to be made about our personal information is massively increased by the fact that there is so much of it out there and so much of it is collated by different agencies.
Google on the internet serves almost the same function as the World Bank in the globe. In other words, Google talks about everything being free, open source, and all shared. Google wants every system to be open. But what Google really wants is every system to be open to Google so that Google can serve ads through every piece of technology.
It's hard to say just how valuable personal information on the web is. I think that most companies would rather have cash to start with, but the information is coming to them almost for free. That is, your clickstream data just comes to the website, comes to advertisers without your actually having to do anything other than just going and clicking on things. So it's a very cheap and unobtrusive form of currency. I mean, probably the best thing about it is that it is so unobtrusive. You don't know you're giving it up, and so it seems entirely free to you.
In a world where information is universally accessible, how do we control our online privacy? The line between our online lives and our offline lives is blurring, and our privacy and our control over who we are and how we want others to see us is disappearing. Now, we know that nothing is free, not online, not offline. We know that there's a value exchange for those free apps and services that we use, and that our information is collected and stored and shared by companies. We agreed to it when we hit accept on some privacy policy somewhere. But no matter how in control that you think you are of your privacy, you are not.
If you think about all the different aspects of your life, ranging from your income to your health, to your relationship with your employers, to your intimate relationships with your family, all the information, much of the information that's involved there is very, very important to you personally. It's very valuable to you because you're able to manage it, able to present yourself to other people, able to keep new ideas, which are still rather tender, not ready for scrutiny, growing until they're ready to be aired publicly. In all these ways, we've got this real need to have a wide margin of personal discretion around us. And if other people know what's going on in our thoughts and in our personal records and communications, they've invaded that margin and they've made it less easy for us to control our own lives.
in a 2009 interview with the longtime CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt, who, when asked about all the different ways his company is causing invasions of privacy for hundreds of millions of people around the world, said this. He said, "If you're doing something that you don't want other people to know, maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place." Now, there's all kinds of things to say about that mentality. The first of which is that the people who say that privacy isn't really important, they don't actually believe it. And the way you know that they don't actually believe it is that while they say with their words that privacy doesn't matter, with their actions they take all kinds of steps to safeguard their privacy. They put passwords on their email and their social media accounts. They put locks on their bedroom and bathroom doors, all steps designed to prevent other people from entering what they consider their private realm and knowing what it is that they don't want other people to know. The very same Eric Schmidt, the CEO of Google, ordered his employees at Google to cease speaking with the online internet magazine CNET after CNET published an article full of personal, private information about Eric Schmidt, which it obtained exclusively through Google searches and using other Google products.
Well, we've had examples recently in the United Kingdom of very sensitive information about individuals, health records, military, police records, being lost because they've been left on a CD in the back of somebody's motor car. We've had examples of people being able to hack into what should be very, very secure systems. For example, as I speak, there is an extradition warrant out for an individual in the United Kingdom who hacked into the United States Navy, military, NASA, and the Defense Department computers nearly 100 times. Now, this kind of thing is tremendously worrying, because you can imagine that if a private investigator or the police or a criminal organization was trying to blackmail somebody or try to get personal information or just trying to get your or my credit card numbers, that it would be relatively easy for them to do it, given the porousness of these data storage instruments and the fact that it's very, very difficult to keep them secure and to police them properly. So by giving up so much of our personal information, as we do every time we buy something online or every time we talk to somebody on a mobile phone, we're exposing ourselves to risk. And one can think that in the records of, for example, British banks, people claiming that their credit card numbers have been misused, there would be thousands and thousands of such cases every year.
We as human beings, even those of us who in words disclaim the importance of our own privacy, instinctively understand the profound importance of it. It is true that as human beings we're social animals, which means we have a need for other people to know what we're doing and saying and thinking, which is why we voluntarily publish information about ourselves online. But equally essential to what it means to be a free and fulfilled human being is to have a place that we can go and be free of the judgmental eyes of other people. There's a reason why we seek that out, and that reason is that all of us, not just terrorists and criminals, all of us have things to hide.